She had no name. For 3 years she had been simply the prize girl, a living trophy displayed in the saloon window of Deadwood Creek, Colorado. The iron chain around her ankle had worn a permanent mark in her dark skin, and the small platform, where she sat each day, had become her entire world. Men would come to stare, to point, to place bets on who might win her in the next card game. But she wasn't looking at them anymore. She had learned to let her mind travel elsewhere, to the mountains she could see through the dusty glass, to memories of a childhood before the raids, before the auction blocks, before she became property with a price tag. The morning everything changed, started like any other. Marshall Briggs unlocked her chain from the wall and led her to the platform, the metal links clanking against the wooden floor. The saloon keeper, a thick-set man named Garrett, was already setting up for the days. "Customers, make sure she looks presentable," Garrett barked to his wife, who approached with a damp cloth and a comb. "We've got visitors coming through town today. Word is there's a rich rancher looking to make a purchase." The woman, Mrs. Garrett, cleaned her face with rough efficiency, no gentleness in her touch. "Sit up straight," she commanded. "Look worthy of the money you're supposed to bring." Through the window, she watched the morning crowd gather in the street. Cowboys heading to work, merchants opening their shops, children running between wagons. All of them free to move where they chose, to speak when they wanted, to be human beings instead of objects for sale. Then she saw him, a tall man in a worn leather coat, riding a paint horse down the main street. He moved differently than most. Men in Deadwood Creek, with quiet confidence and eyes that seemed to take in everything without judgment. When he dismounted outside the general store, she noticed he removed his hat respectfully when speaking to the shopkeeper's wife. "That's him," Garrett said, spotting the stranger through the window. "Samuel Ward owns the biggest ranch in 3 counties. Heard he's looking for house help, someone to cook and clean for his operation." The girl's stomach clenched. She had been sold before, traded from one owner to another like livestock. Each time, the promise was the same: better conditions, easier work, kinder treatment. Each time, the reality was just another form of captivity. Samuel Ward entered the saloon an hour later, his presence immediately commanding attention without him saying a word. He was perhaps 40 years old, with silver threading through his dark hair and weathered hands that spoke of honest work. But it was his eyes that made her look up from her usual distant stare. They held no greed, no assessment of her value. They held something she hadn't seen in years: simple human recognition. "Mr. Ward," Garrett rushed forward, all nervous energy and forced smiles. "Welcome to Deadwood Creek. I believe you're interested in making a purchase." "I'm interested in hearing about the situation," Ward replied carefully, his voice low and measured. "What I've been told doesn't sit well with me." "Oh, she's a good worker, no trouble at all. Quiet, obedient, knows her place. Young enough to give you many years of service." Garrett gestured toward the platform like he was selling a horse. "And clean, of course. We've kept her in good condition." Ward's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "How long has she been here?" 3 years now. Won her from a trader who couldn't pay his debts. She's been a good investment. Draws customers who like to look while they drink." Garrett's laugh was unpleasant. "Of course, looking's all they get to do unless they're willing to pay the full price." For the first time in months, she felt something other than resignation. There was anger building in this stranger's eyes, a quiet fury that he was trying very hard to control. "I'd like to speak with her," Ward said. "Speak with her?" Garrett looked confused. "Sir, she's not really for conversation. She does what she's told, when she's told. That's what makes her valuable. Nevertheless, I'd like to hear her voice." Garrett shrugged and gestured impatiently. "Go ahead, girl. Tell the gentleman your name." She looked up at Samuel Ward, meeting his storm-gray eyes directly for the first time. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper, rusty from disuse. "I don't have a name, sir. I'm just the prize girl." Something flickered across Ward's face, pain mixed with determination. "Everyone has a name." "What were you called before you came here?" The question hit her like a physical blow. Before. When she was 6 years old, running through tall grass with her sisters, when her grandmother sang lullabies in their native tongue, when she was a person instead of property. But that name felt sacred now, too precious to speak aloud in this place of degradation. "I don't remember, sir," she lied. Ward studied her face for a long moment, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see right through her words to the truth beneath. Then he turned to Garrett with an expression that made the saloon keeper take a step backward. "What's your asking price?" "For permanent ownership, $2,000. She's young, healthy, good for many years of work. Plus she's exotic, if you understand my meaning. Adds a certain distinction to a household. I'll give you $1,500. Cash. Right now." Garrett's eyes widened with greed. "Sir, I appreciate the quick offer, but $1,500 or I walk out that door and you continue to feed and house her while hoping someone else comes along willing to pay your full price." Ward's voice carried the quiet authority of a man accustomed to making deals. "Your choice." The negotiation continued for several more minutes, but she barely heard it. All she could think about was Ward's question. "What were you called before?" "You came here." The name echoed in her mind like a half-remembered song. Elena. Her grandmother had called her Elena, little bright star in the language of their people. But Elena had died in the raid 3 years ago. The girl who sat chained in this saloon window was no one, had no past, no future beyond whatever her next owner decided for her. Or so she had believed, until a quiet rancher looked at her and asked for her name as if she were a person whose answer mattered. The transaction was completed with cold efficiency. $1,500 changed hands, papers were signed, and ownership transferred from one man to another. She watched it all happen as if from a great distance, her mind struggling to process that her life had just been decided by the contents of Samuel Ward's leather wallet. "The chain stays," Garrett said as Ward prepared to leave. "Part of the purchase. Keeps her from running off." Ward looked down at the iron shackle around her ankle, his expression unreadable. "I'll need the key." Course. Garrett fumbled in his vest pocket and produced a small brass key. "She's used to it. Won't give you any trouble. Just remember to keep it locked at night, and don't let her near any tools that might help her pick it." Ward pocketed the key without comment, then turned to her. "Can you walk with that thing on?" She nodded, though the truth was more complicated. 3 years of the chain had left her with a permanent limp, and the weight of the metal made longer. Distances painful, but she had learned not to complain about pain. Complaints led to worse treatment. "We'll take it slow," Ward said, as if reading her thoughts. "My wagon's just outside." The short walk to the street felt like traveling to another world. For 3 years, she had seen the outside only through glass. Now the Colorado sun touched her face directly, and the mountain air filled her lungs with scents of pine and freedom she had almost forgotten existed. Ward's wagon was simple but well-maintained, drawn by 2 sturdy horses that nickered softly. As he approached, he helped her up onto the seat with surprising gentleness, making sure she was steady before climbing up beside her. "It's a half-day's ride to my ranch," he said, gathering the reins. "You hungry? Thirsty?" The questions caught her off guard. When had anyone last asked about her comfort? "I'm fine, sir." "No, you're not." His tone wasn't harsh, just matter of fact. "You're thin as a rail and pale as winter. When's the last time you had a proper meal?" She couldn't remember. Food at the saloon had been whatever scraps were left over, eaten quickly and in silence. "I don't know, sir." Ward reached into a pack behind the seat and pulled out a cloth bundle. Inside were thick slices of bread, cheese, and dried meat. "Eat," he said simply. "It's a long ride, and you'll need your strength." As the wagon rolled through the streets of Deadwood Creek and out into the open country, she ate slowly, savoring flavors she had nearly forgotten. Ward didn't try to make conversation, seeming to understand that she needed time to process this sudden change in her circumstances. The landscape gradually shifted from the dusty mining town to rolling hills covered in tall grass and wildflowers. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still touched with snow despite the summer heat. It was beautiful in a way that made her chest ache with memories of another life, another time when she had been free to run through similar meadows. "What's your ranch like?" she asked eventually, surprising herself by speaking without being spoken to first. "Quiet. Peaceful. I raise cattle mostly, some horses. Got a house that's too big for one person and land that stretches farther than I can work alone." He glanced at her sideways. Been looking for help for a while, but not the kind Garrett was offering. What kind, then? The kind where a person works because they choose to, earns fair wages, and gets treated with respect. Ward's hands were steady on the reins, his voice calm. The kind where someone gets to be human instead of property. The words hit her like water to someone dying of thirst. But you bought me. The papers say I own you, yes. But paper doesn't make something right. Ward was quiet for a moment, watching the road ahead. My wife used to say that. Freedom isn't something you can buy or sell. It's something every person is born with, even if others try to take it away. Your wife died 4 years ago. Fever took her, along with our unborn child. His voice carried old grief, carefully, controlled. Martha was a good woman, believed in treating people decent regardless of their circumstances. She would have liked you. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the wagon wheels creating a steady rhythm on the dirt road. She found herself relaxing for the first time in years, the mountain air and Ward's calm presence working together to ease tensions she'd carried so long she'd forgotten they were there. "Can I ask you something?" Ward said as they crested a hill that offered a view of Green Valley below. "Yes, sir. What's your real name? Not what they called you in that place, but your actual name." The question she'd been dreading and hoping for in equal measure. She looked out at the vast landscape, at the freedom stretching endlessly in all directions, and made a choice that felt like stepping off a cliff. "Elena," she whispered. "My grandmother called me Elena." "Elena," Ward repeated, the name with careful respect as if testing its weight. "That's a beautiful name. Means bright light, doesn't it?" Tears sprang to her eyes. She hadn't cried in 3 years, had trained herself not to show that kind of vulnerability. But hearing her name spoken with kindness, with recognition of its meaning and importance, broke something open inside her. "Yes, sir. Bright light. Well, Elena, welcome to your new life. And the first rule of this new life is that you don't have to call me sir. My name is Samuel, and I'd be honored if you'd use it." She looked at him through her tears, this quiet man who had bought her freedom with money, but was giving her something far more valuable with his words. "Thank you, Samuel." As they descended into the valley toward a house that sat surrounded by green pastures and clear streams, Eleanor felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years. Hope. Not the desperate, grasping hope of escape, but the quiet, steady hope of someone who was finally going home. The chain was still around her ankle, but somehow it felt lighter already. The Ward Ranch was nothing like Elena had expected. Instead of a small cabin, she saw a 2-story house with a wraparound porch and flower boxes beneath clean windows. Cattle grazed peacefully in emerald pastures, and horses ran free in a large corral, their coats gleaming in the afternoon sun. "It's beautiful," she breathed, forgetting for a moment to guard her words. "Martha designed most of it," Samuel said, pride evident in his voice. "She had a vision for what this place could become. I've tried to keep it the way she would have wanted." He helped her down from the wagon, mindful of the chain that made her movements awkward. As they approached the front porch, Elena noticed something that made her heart skip. There was no separate servant's entrance, no indication that she was expected to use a different door than the owner. "This is your home now," Samuel said, as if reading her thoughts. "You'll have your own room upstairs, proper meals at the dining table, and fair wages for your work." Elena stopped walking. "Wages? $20 a month plus room and board. That's more than most ranch hands make, but you'll be doing important work." Samuel's expression was serious. "Cooking, cleaning, maybe helping with the books if you can read and write. But the most important thing is that you'll be doing it by choice. But the papers say I'm your property. The papers are wrong." Samuel reached into his pocket and pulled out the brass key Garrett had given him. "May I?" Elena looked down at the chain around her ankle, the weight she had carried for 3 years. Part of her was terrified to have it removed. As awful as it was, the chain had become familiar, a constant in a world where everything else could change without warning. "What if I run away?" she asked quietly. "Then I'll know I failed to make this a place worth staying." Samuel knelt beside, her key in hand, but didn't touch the lock yet. "Elena, I'm not asking you to trust me because I own you. I'm asking you to trust me because you're a human being who deserves better than what you've had." With shaking hands, she lifted her foot slightly, giving him access to the shackle. The key turned easily, and the iron band fell away with a metallic clunk that seemed to echo across the valley. Elena stared down at her bare ankle, at the pale band of skin that marked where the chain had rested. "How does it feel?" Samuel asked, standing slowly. She took a tentative step, then another. Without the weight of the chain, she felt almost weightless, as if she might float away like dandelion seeds on the wind. "Strange, like I might forget how to walk." "You'll remember. Give it time." Samuel showed her through the house, each room clean and well-maintained, despite the absence of a woman's touch. The kitchen was large and modern, with a proper stove and pantry full of supplies. Her bedroom was on the second floor, with a bed, a window overlooking the mountains, and a door that could be locked from the inside. "The key is yours," Samuel said, placing it in her palm. "Your space, your privacy, your choice." That evening, Elena prepared her first meal as a free woman. She moved carefully through the kitchen, relearning the simple joy of cooking without supervision, of seasoning food to her own taste rather than someone else's demands. When Samuel came in from his evening chores, the table was set with roast beef, potatoes, and fresh bread. "Smells wonderful," he said, washing his hands at the sink. "Been a long time since this house had proper cooking." They ate together at the dining table, the first time Elena had shared a meal as an equal in 3 years. Samuel asked about her cooking, complimented the flavors, treated her like a valued employee rather than property, but she could see him, watching her carefully, noting how she still flinched when he moved suddenly, how she kept her eyes down out of habit. "Elena," he said gently as they finished eating, "you know you can look at me when we're talking, right? You don't have to keep your head down anymore?" She raised her eyes slowly, meeting his gaze across the table. "It's hard to remember. The rules were very clear about not looking directly at owners. I'm not your owner. I'm your employer, and hopefully someday your friend." Samuel's voice was firm but kind. "The only rules here are basic human decency. Treat others with respect, work honestly, and remember that you have value beyond what you can do for someone else." After dinner, Samuel retreated to his study to work on ranch accounts while Elena cleaned the kitchen. As she worked, she found herself humming softly, a lullaby her grandmother used to sing. It was the first time she had made music in 3 years, and the sound of her own voice felt foreign and wonderful. When she finished, she stepped outside, onto the back porch, breathing in the cool night air. The mountains rose like sleeping giants against the star-filled sky, and somewhere in the distance, she could hear cattle lowing peacefully. It was so quiet, so peaceful, that she almost couldn't believe it was real. "Beautiful night," Samuel said from behind her. She turned to see him standing in the doorway, his expression thoughtful. "Martha used to love evenings like this," said. "They made her feel connected to something bigger than herself." "I understand that feeling," Elena said softly. "My grandmother taught me that the stars were the spirits of our ancestors, watching over us." "Wise woman, what else did she teach you?" For the first time in years, Elena smiled genuinely. "That every person carries light inside them, even when the world tries to snuff it out. That kindness is the most powerful force in creation, and that no one can take away who you really are, no matter what they do to your body." Samuel was quiet for a moment, looking up at the endless sky. "She sounds like someone Martha would have liked very much." As Eleanor prepared for bed that night, she caught sight of herself in the mirror above the dresser. The woman, looking back at her, was thin and marked by hardship, but there was something different in her eyes, something that had been missing for 3 years, hope. Not just the hope of survival, but the hope of actually living again. She locked her bedroom door from the inside, not because she feared Samuel, but because she could, because the choice was hers to make. For the first time in 3 years, Elena fell asleep without the weight of chains. 2 months passed before the test came. Elena had settled into the rhythm of ranch life, her days filled with cooking, cleaning, and helping Samuel with the accounts. She had gained weight, her limp had nearly disappeared, and laughter had returned to her voice. But the real measure of her transformation came on a Tuesday morning when riders appeared on the horizon. "Trouble coming," Samuel said grimly, watching. Through the kitchen window as 5 men approached on horseback. Elena recognized the lead rider immediately, Marshall Briggs from Deadwood Creek, the same man who had chained her to the saloon wall each morning. "They've come for me," she whispered, instinctively stepping back from the window. "No one's taking you anywhere," Samuel said firmly. "You're a free woman working for fair wages. Whatever they think they're here for, they're wrong." But Elena's hands trembled as she untied her apron. 3 years of conditioning couldn't be erased in 2 months. When men with authority came looking for her, it usually meant pain and degradation. The riders dismounted outside, their voices carrying through the morning air. "Ward, need to have a word with you." Samuel walked onto the porch with Elena behind. His posture relaxed but ready. "Morning, Marshall. What brings you all the way out here?" "Got a complaint filed in town. Garrett says you've been letting your property run around without proper restraints. Claims she's been seen in town acting like a free woman, making purchases, talking to folks like she's got rights." "Because she does have rights," Samuel replied calmly. "Elena works for me as a paid employee. She's free to come and go as she pleases." Marshall Briggs laughed harshly. "Employee? What, you bought her fair and square? Got the papers right here." He pulled a folded document from his vest. "She's property, and property needs to be controlled. Those papers are worthless. I'm paying Elena $20 a month plus room and board. She's got her own bank account in town and everything." Samuel's voice remained steady, but Elena could see the tension in his shoulders. "Bank account?" One of the other men spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "Since when do property get bank accounts?" "Since they stop being property and start being people," Samuel shot back. Elena stepped forward, her heart pounding but her voice clear. "I choose to work here. I choose to stay. And I choose to speak for myself." The silence that followed was deafening. Marshall Briggs stared at her as if she had grown a second head. "You don't get to choose anything, girl. You're coming back to Deadwood Creek where you belong. My name is Elena," she said firmly, "and I belong wherever I decide to be. Your name is whatever your owner says it is," Briggs snarled, dismounting and pulling a set of shackles from his saddlebag. "Now hold still while I put these on, or this is going to get unpleasant." Samuel moved between them, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. "Marshall, I strongly advise you to think carefully about your next action. You threatening a lawman, Ward? I'm protecting an employee from unlawful detention. Elena is a free woman, and I've got witnesses in town who'll testify to that fact." The standoff stretched for long seconds. 5 armed men facing Samuel while Elena stood behind him, no longer the cowering victim she had once been. Finally, she stepped around Samuel to face the marshal directly. "You want to put chains on me again?" she asked quietly. "Go ahead, but you should know that I'm not the same person you'll be chaining. That girl died the day Samuel gave me back. My name. The woman standing here won't break as easily." Marshall Briggs studied her face, perhaps seeing for the first time the steel that had always been there, hidden beneath years of forced submission. "Garrett's not going to like this. Garrett can file all the complaints he wants," Samuel said. "But Elena stays here as a free woman for as long as she chooses." After another tense moment, Briggs replaced the shackles in his saddlebag. "This isn't over, Ward. Paperwork says she's property and the law's the law. Then maybe it's time to change some laws," Elena said clearly. The men rode away in a cloud of dust and muttered threats, but Elena felt no fear. She watched them disappear over the ridge, then turned to find Samuel looking at her with something that might have been pride. "You stood up to them," he said simply. "I learned from watching you. You never treated me like I was less than human, even when the law said I was. That taught me something important." "What's that?" "That dignity isn't something someone gives you. It's something you claim for yourself." Elena smiled, feeling stronger than she had in years. "And I'm claiming mine." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, Samuel made an announcement that changed everything. "I've been thinking about those papers Briggs mentioned, the ones that supposedly make you property." He pulled out a folded document and handed it to her. "I had my lawyer draw these up." Elena unfolded the papers with trembling hands. At the top, in formal legal language, were the words, "Certificate of Manumission." Below that, her name, Elena, Morningstar, the surname Samuel had helped her choose to honor her grandmother's memory. "You're legally free now," Samuel explained gently. "No one can ever claim ownership of you again. You're your own person with all the rights that entails." Eleanor stared at the document through tears of joy. "Why? Why would you do this?" "Because it's right. Because my wife would have insisted on it. And because you've become more than an employee to me, Elena. You've become family." As the stars appeared in the darkening sky, Elena folded the precious papers carefully and placed them over her heart. She thought of her grandmother, who had taught her that every person carries light inside them. That light had been dimmed for 3 years, but it had never been extinguished. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me back my name, my freedom, and most importantly, my choice." "Thank you," Samuel replied, "for reminding me that the best things in life aren't owned. They're shared." Elena looked out over the ranch that had become her home, at the mountains that no longer seemed like barriers, but like guardians watching over her new life. She was no longer the nameless prize girl in chains. She was Elena Morningstar, a free woman who had chosen her own path. And for the first time in years, the future stretched before her, bright with endless possibilities. What an incredible transformation. Elena's journey from nameless property to a woman who claims her own dignity shows us the power of human kindness and respect to heal even the deepest wounds. If this story moved you, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Stories like Elena's remind us that every person deserves to be seen, heard, and valued for who they are. What did you think of Elena's transformation? How important do you think it was that Samuel treated her as human from the very beginning? And what does Elena's courage in standing up to the marshal teach us about finding strength we didn't know we had? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to check out our other powerful stories about courage, dignity, and the triumph of the human spirit. Next week, we'll bring you another incredible tale of someone who refused to be broken by their circumstances. Like this video if Elena's journey inspired you, and remember that everyone deserves to be called by their name and treated with dignity, no matter what their circumstances. See you in the next story, where ordinary people do extraordinary things.